So, this is my I Thou project for this whole semester. My wonderful world religions teacher kind of pushed me outside of my comfort zone this semester. So, the project started with a look at introspection, so ourself, and then we had to slowly move into outerspection. My original plan was I was gonna focus on animism, and then I realized it had really close ties to where I started, so I went another direction. Um, so that's kind of the project overview. I chose the podcast, hence the voice recording. And I'm just going to go ahead and get ready to dive right in. My podcast does have to be between 30 minutes and an hour. So I talk a lot and I talk very passionately about things. So we'll see how much time it actually takes. So, my name is Michaelyn Hollinsworth. I'm 22 years old and I'm a senior at William Woods this year. And I am a practicing pagan. For a while, I did choose to solely identify as Wiccan, but the more research that I did and the more I grew into my craft, I realized that a lot of Wicca is cultural appropriation, and so I decided that I was just gonna stick to that umbrella term of paganism, but all in all, I practice witchcraft. Um, Not necessarily the witchcraft that would have gotten me burned at the stake a couple thousands of years ago, but modern witchcraft. So I technically fall into that category of neo paganism, so like New Age paganism. Um, just a little quick brief about me. I grew up the beginning of my life pagan. It wasn't until my middle sister Mackenzie was born that my mom decided that she was going to go back to the church. And I can't really speak for my mom or her accounts, but I'm sure she had a good reasoning behind it. So when my mom decided to go back to the church, we kind of left paganism at the front door and allowed Christianity into our home. It wasn't until probably 12 or 13 that I stopped going to church with my family. We went every Wednesday and every Sunday morning. We prayed at all three meals and we did nighttime prayers. Like, we were your textbook Christian household, which was fine. I don't have a problem with it at all. But when I did stop going to church, I did have to have a really hard conversation with my mom and kind of just let her know, like, hey, this doesn't make sense to me and I don't feel like this is where I belong. And I told her straight up that I didn't believe in her God. And it really hurt. My family is very heavy Christian Catholic Baptist, like all of the normal, mainstream kind of stuff. And it was really hard for us to have that conversation. When I was a freshman in high school, I even went as far as identifying as atheist, and that was a hard pill for my family to swallow, and that's fine. They still supported me when I came out as bisexual. It was really, really hard for them, hate the sin, or hate the sin, not the sinner kind of stuff. But they grew on that, and everyone's really accepting now. It's not a big issue. I'm getting kind of emotional. I'm sorry. Talking about myself is hard, but here we are. Um, so back to the paganism, the I part of the project. So it wasn't until the summer in between junior and senior year of high school that I really started to gain an interest in it. I was packing up my stuff to go to college. Everything was great. And I found an old box. And in that box was a book. And it briefly touched on like the umbrella term of paganism, like, oh, just the old way of things. And the more I read, I was really interested. And then I decided to do my own research. And I just kept researching and researching and researching and researching. Oh my god, I spent so many hours in the library, so many hours in front of a computer screen. And it, it was something I was very interested in, but I was still heavy on that idea that atheism was the correct answer. Um, and then I get to college. I'm a sophomore in college, or a freshman in college. I'm a freshman in college. And my roommate was a very, very heavily devout Christian, and at times it made me uncomfortable. But I couldn't necessarily tell her why it made me uncomfortable because I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to invalidate her beliefs. So I kind of kept it to myself and I kept doing research. And then I got caught up with the wave of being a freshman in college. And I kind of forgot about it a little bit. And then afterwards, that summer in between freshman and sophomore year, it really kind of clicked. I got back into research, I'd been doing stuff, and it felt like home. It was a very, very like nostalgic feeling. I felt like I belonged there, like it was right for me. My beliefs aligned with the beliefs of most pagans, and that's when I sat down with my mom again. I'm 18, almost 19 at this time. I was probably 19. And I sat down and I was like, Mom, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. And my mom, being the amazing woman she is, she was like, okay, if this is where you're supposed to be, it's where you're supposed to be. And that was a big kind of punch in the face for me. It was like, wow, not only is my mom here to support me academically, for a long time financially, emotionally, but now she's supporting me spiritually, which I didn't think was going to be a possibility. Not because my mom didn't love me or any of that textbook stuff, but just because, of her beliefs. And then she reminded me that she once was a Wiccan and practiced heavily in Wicca. So that's kind of where the journey began. I had a hard time with labels. A really hard time with labels. I still have a hard time with labels. But finally, I came to terms with the fact that I am an eclectic pagan. I have a focus in green and divination. So green witches are nature-based witches, and divination witches are exactly what they sound like. Scrying mirrors, tarot decks, runestones, bones, tea leaf readings, pendulums, and I do all of that. I actually have 8 tarot decks, 2 oracle decks, a runestone set. I throw bones. I read tea leaves, and I have 2 or 3 pendulums floating around. I have clients from all over the world who come to me for readings. I have pretty low ball prices for most tarot readers, and it does wear me a little thin sometimes, but just helping someone who doesn't quite how to interpret their cards or just want an outside perspective, it brings me a peace of mind knowing that I can help them. So with that paganism comes a lot of hard conversations to have. When I met my fiance's family, that was a fun time. Kind of coming to the conclusion that I am going to have to tell them some point, when they come over for holidays and, they're celebrating Christmas and I'm celebrating the winter solstice or Yule, or when they're all trick-or-treating on Halloween and I am going to see, my past relatives at the graveyards and leaving them, water and food, because Samhain, which is, I don't want to say the white man's Halloween, but the Christian holiday that was adapted from paganism. It's all about dressing up and trick-or-treating and carving jack-o'-lanterns. And for us, we're visiting our ancestors because the veil between the worlds is really thin. So we want to make sure they're having safe travels. We're protecting our houses with wards to make sure that no evil gets in. The holidays are very very, very different from religion to religion. Um, you know, so I do celebrate all of the pagan holidays, starting with Yule in December, followed by Imbolc, Ostara, Beltane, Litha, Lugustana, Mabon, Samhain. So our Mabon is your Thanksgiving. Our Lugistan is our summer harvest. Our Litha is our spring harvest. Beltane is very similar to May Day, you know. Ostara is our Easter, but we don't have a rabbit or Easter eggs. We celebrate fertility and nature, like life returning back to the earth after a cold, long winter. Um, and then Imbolc is another spring celebration. It's very like start your gardens, all that fun stuff. Um, so a lot of paganism is more nature based. Not everybody works with deities. I personally do. I actually work with two different pantheons. I work with a Greek pantheon, so my patron is Pan. My matron is Hecate. And then I also leave offerings and worship Dionysus, Hestia, and the Norse goddess Hel. From an outside perspective, people are like, oh, it's no different than worshiping our God. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. It's the exact same. Just our gods come to us and you go to your God. I might get into the podcast business. So if you have any questions about that, I'll answer them in another video because it's really hard to fit into the 15 minutes I have blocked out for talking about me. But back to the main point, moving from introspection to outerspection was really hard for me. I'd spent so long not knowing if I fit in with the religion that was assigned to me at birth. And, it was very confusing. So trying to get out of my comfort zone and, I wouldn't say abandon, but kind of put my religion to the side so I could focus on another one for a while was really hard, and it made me very emotional. There were a lot of days that I spent crying and sitting at my altar, lighting my candles, giving offerings to my deities. It was emotional. It really was, because it didn't hurt me to learn about this other religion. It was different. And I did find parallels, which I thought was really interesting. Now, they're not the exact same, but just to show you that all religions are different, but not as different as we think they are. So that was just, overall, this project has, brought me a lot of joy. I chose to do my project over Hinduism. And like I said in the beginning, I was going to do animism, but it was too closely tied and all that fun stuff. But I decided to do Hinduism because of our guest speaker in class. Watching her interview with Travis, I don't even think I got up for a bathroom break. That is how interested I was. So I thought to myself, why not? Right? Why not? It held my attention from the beginning. Let's see if it can hold my attention throughout the remaining time in the semester. And it did. I'm a big documentary buff. I did not find any documentaries that I liked on Hinduism. But I would love to keep looking. I'm just, started to run out of time on my documentary search. But, I did Hinduism. And my fiance is actually very knowledgeable, and I thought about using him as a source, but then I was like, no, because he can tell me all the stories in the world, and it's not going to be the same as learning for myself. So that's what I did. And let me tell you, I think I might be in love. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into Hinduism. We're going to do a brief overview. Excuse me, that was gross. So we're going to start with a brief overview of Hinduism as a whole. And then I decided to kind of narrow down two topics that are really important to me and in my religion. So I wanted to, kind of look at it in that other perspective from the different religion. So the two topics I'm choosing is I have picked technically two deities to talk about. One of them is the central deity, so, one being three faces. So technically two deities, but in all actuality, five. And then I decided to do one of the festivals because, as a practicing pagan, my rituals are very, very important to me, and my celebrations are very, very important to me. So I really just wanted to look at another religion's traditions, because I know all about Christmas and Hanukkah and, all of that, because I grew up like that. I don't want to say Orthodox because I don't think that's the correct word, but I did grow up around that stuff. And up until that interview, I have never met a Hindu in my life. I've seen them depicted in media, but other than that, nothing. So it caught my eye the fastest. So we all know major world religions. Hinduism is actually one of them, and it is the oldest world religion. According to research and my own research, if we look at the Indus Valley Civilization, which was around the 3rd to 2nd millennium BCE, so around 1500 BCE, they're the first accounts of Hinduism in the world. So that makes Hinduism the oldest religion. So now that I have this knowledge, just know when I get into religious debates, it will come up. But not in a malicious way, but just because I like educational debates and people who challenge me like that, I really like talking with. So I did actually find a bunch of really, really cool information. Like the fact that Hinduism originated on a subcontinent of India, which is now modern day Pakistan. I did not know that. You kind of learn about stuff here and there throughout the years in school, but unless you really dive in, you don't. And I thought that was so interesting because, I know this about Hinduism, but if you ask me, a very devout pagan where, paganism originated, I couldn't tell you. I would have to do another semester's worth of research. Excuse me. And the term Hinduism itself is actually a relatively new term. The religion itself wasn't coined Hinduism until about the 19th century. I thought that was really cool because, you hear about this world religion, Hinduism, and you're like, oh, it's always been called that. Like Catholicism has always been Catholicism or XYZ. And the fact that this religion was named, it was named by a scholar. Off the top of my head, I didn't put that in my notes, but I can't remember. But I did think that was very interesting that Hinduism's name didn't come from the Hindus. It came from a scholar. I'm getting emotional again. I don't know what's wrong with me. But like I said, the Indus Valley civilization is the oldest account of Hinduism to date. And, that makes it the oldest religion in the world, on Earth. And that's just crazy to me. So Hinduism as a whole, it's comprised of various philosophies, beliefs, and rituals, like most religions. So that's a parallel that I found when I stated, I found similarities that just really showed me that even though all religions are different, they're not so different than everyone thinks they are. I actually found it very interesting. One of the articles that I read was talking about the sacred text. I know about the Torah, the Bible. Pagans also have sacred text, like the Wiccan Rede and a few other accounts. But I thought that it was very interesting that the original sacred texts are in Sanskrit and other vernacular languages. So the languages itself varied from region to region, but it was understood and spread that way. I mean, art and media had an influence on it too, but it wasn't mainly just that. It was storytelling like the Native Americans. And to me, that was just, you know, eye opening because I learned about the spread of Christianity in like Catholics and stuff like that all throughout history. It's a big part of history. But to kind of go on my own and learn that about that, I just thought that it was amazing. It was breathtaking if I'm being honest, and that's not just me like chalking it up. Like I really enjoyed all of the research that I did. And another fun fact that I found about like Hinduism as a whole is it had a really strong influence on Southeast Asia. That started in the 4th century and it lasted 1,000 years before, another religion came in and became top dog, if you want to put it that way. Hinduism also makes up 80% of India's population. That's like, basic math. 20% of them aren't practicing Hindus, but it's such a big thing. And when I read that, I was like, how awesome would it be to live in a place with so many people who believe what you believe in? Because, I'm not a Christian, I'm a pagan. In the wise words of the nice lady in the supermarket, I am a hell-breathing heretic. I know that's not true, and I think it's funny when people call me something like that, but I would love to be surrounded by 80% of people who believe in the same thing I do. So again, so the big thing, like as a pagan, what I accept and celebrate is different than Christians, and even the Hindus. So, in my notes, I have that Hindus accept and celebrate organic, multi-level nature of their traditions. So, I wasn't really sure how to interpret that, but then I realized it is the same as any other religion. Like, their traditions are what make them them. And I think that's beautiful. Excuse me, my nose is so runny. You're just going to be listening to this podcast and just hear me sniffling up boogers. I'm so sorry. So Hinduism is shaped by 5 elements. That first element is doctrine. So all of their documents and beliefs. 2 is their practice. 3 is society, and this is like the caste system. I probably should have looked into that specifically a little more. Like, I can see the diagram in my head from when we learned about it in history class and like middle school, but I couldn't tell you what each tier are anymore. 4 is the story and 5 is devotion. So again, that's really similar to, my core beliefs, like the things that shape me and my journey as a pagan. So I just thought that was great. Another fun thing that I found is that Hindus, they believe that human beings' basic nature is not like confined to the body or the mind. It's the spirit or the soul. So again, that plays back into the caste system and reincarnation a little bit. And I just thought that was beautiful because what that means is with the idea of reincarnation that comes from, Hinduism, that everything can, like all the bad stuff you're going through, all the really good stuff you're going through can be explained by your past life. And that's, you know what, that is something that us pagans take into account too. Like, you'll hear a lot of especially people on the internet, talk about their witch's mark. It's a freckle on their arm that most every pagan has. And it comes from a past life or birthmarks or stuff like that. So the fact that reincarnation is ruled by karma is very similar to the threefold law. Like what you put out, good or bad, will come back at you threefold. So the Hindus, their past life is an explanation for their present life, and their present life, all the good things that they're thriving to do, hopefully, I'm being hopeful here, all the good things that they're thriving to do is to make themselves better in the next life. And again, that's, it's very similar. There are parallels that are showing up here. And I honestly, I'm gonna tell you this straightforward. I didn't think that I was gonna find parallels. I pride myself in being a pagan and non-Christian and very accepting of everyone, even though I know that varies from Christian to Christian. But I pride myself in that, and to be knocked down a couple of pegs, it was a nice get back in your lane kind of feel. So we know that monotheistic religions are religions such as, Christianity, baptism, the Catholics, I believe Judaism as well. And then you have polytheism. So, that you're pagans, and in this case, technically the Hindus. I did find that they have a supreme god or deity, supreme, like an overruler kind of guy. But the deities that are spoken about in different lore and fiction and celebrations, like the festival I'm going to talk about later, they're manifestations. They're manifestations from the supreme guy. And I thought that was beautiful, because deity work is really important to me. So finding all of these little tidbits about deities from Hinduism, I loved it. I actually did a little more research specifically on the supreme god. He is also known as a central deity, and the central deity is actually comprised of 4 faces. The three that I'm going to talk about are the most common ones. So you have Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the protector, and then you have Shiva, the destroyer. So I did know about Shiva. I had seen Shiva depicted in multiple movies, animations, just media as a whole. But Brahma, I actually found really interesting because I did some research. I actually have it pulled up right now. I'm going to read a little snippet that I thought was very interesting, because Brahma, despite being a part of the central deity, like the supreme god, is not actually worshipped that much. And that kind of threw me for a loop, because you'd think, oh, the supreme deity, we talk about it all the time, that's our guy, and Brahma's left out. And I was curious on why he was left out. So this is what I found. I'm going to read straight from the article, because I don't want to trip over my words and just pull stuff out of the air. But this says, there are a number of stories in Hindu mythology which point to why he's really worshipped. These are 2 of them. The first view that Brahma created women in order to aid him with his job of creation. She was called Shatarupa? I don't actually know how to pronounce that. I should have Google translated all this before I went ahead and recorded my podcast. I was just feeling real feisty though. She was so beautiful that Brahma became infatuated with her, and he gazed at her wherever she went. This caused her extreme embarrassment, and she tried to turn from his gaze. But in every direction she moved, Brahma sprouted a head until he had developed 4. Finally, she grew so frustrated that she jumped to try to avoid his gaze. Brahma, in his in his obsession, sprouted a fifth head on top of all. It is also said that in some sources, that she kept changing her form. She became every creature on earth to avoid Brahma. He, however, changed his form to the male version of whatever she was, and thus every animal community in the world was created. And I thought that was beautiful. I I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but I can understand why he's not worshipped that often. He, in simple terms, he kind of sounds like a sleazebag. 12 out of 10, don't recommend. But the fact that the world was created from infatuation and everything on it is beautiful. That really makes me think of, all the Greek gods. They all had a job. I'm a heavy Hellenic worshiper. So seeing this, speaking of Hellenic, Hecate is the mother of all magic. So, Brahma and Hecate are very similar, only she wasn't creepy. Next up was Vishnu. So he is the protector, and sadly, off the top of my head, I do not have a deity to kind of compare it to. So in simplest terms, Brahma made everything, and then it was Vishnu's job to preserve it and protect it. And then, of course, Shiva, being the destroyer, Shiva's job was to, take it when the time was right. He is the destroyer, but he also brings recreation. The best way I can think to compare this would almost be, I don't know the terminology, but when the apocalypse comes, basically, and the world dies off and then grows back over, and all of zombie movie stuff, but that's not right. There's a word for it that I'm thinking of, and I can't think of it. It's got something to do with the coming of Jesus is what I'm thinking of. But so these three specifically are kind of like checks and balances, is how I had to kind of rationalize it. Checks and balances, Brahma creates it, Vishnu maintains it, and then Shiva destroys it when it's its time. Another goddess that I wanted to talk about is Ariani. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but she's the goddess of the forest. And while I was doing my research, I was looking at all of these Hindu depictions of their deities, and she immediately caught my eye. Brahma caught my eye, and Vishnu and Shiva, because they're basically the triple moon, which is what Hecate is to me. But then I decided I wanted to talk a little bit on Ariana. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly. Travis, I'm sorry. Because she's the goddess of the forest and the protector of all the things that dwell within it. And that is exactly what my patron is. Pan, the horned god, is also the god of the forest and protector of the animals within. He's also known in Norse culture as Kronos, which is the same thing. And it was, again, one of those parallels that show me that even though we are different, we are not so different. I'm crying at this point. I just want to let you know, I'm so glad now I'm not doing a face recording podcast, because I have tears streaming down my face because I'm getting really emotional. It's enlightening. When Christians pray and they can feel God touch them. I'm not that religious, but I can feel my deities in the room, and they're strong and supportive, almost like soccer moms in the stands cheering for their kids, because they've been with me for a while now. My mom actually has accounts of me from a young child to leaving offerings to Pan, so my mom suspects that Pan has been with me since I was born. So I get really emotional about this. But I just thought that um, it was something, that I found interesting. And then when I realized why I found it interesting, it made it even more interesting. So, one of the things that they talk about is the fact of what forests represent and their source of life and fertility. And when you look at Pan from the Hellenic side of it too, he's often known as the god of chaos and pandemonium and lust and love. But in reality, all of that comes from what it truly means to be a thriving forest. There's chaos, there's pandemonium, there's lust, there's love, fertility. And just to kind of see these parallels between the two, I was amazed. There's not a lot of words for it. And I just kind of wanted to touch on her really quick because I thought that was really, really interesting. So I'm going to move on to the festival portion. I looked at a lot of festivals, and this one specifically stuck out to me. I'm going to get a drink of my water real quick. So my mouth's getting kind of dry, so I'm going to take like a 30-second break, grab a swig of my water, and then I'm going to dive in to the Festival of Lights, or Diwali. Sorry about that. So, Diwali, the Festival of Lights, right? It is a 5-day long celebration, and in different parts of the world where Hinduism is practiced, it means different things. Like in your northern India, they celebrate King Rama's return, and after he defeated Ravana by, you know, lighting rows of these clay lamps. And in southern India, I'm getting really excited and I'm tripping over my words, but in southern India, it celebrates it as a day that Lord Krishna defeated the demon. I wrote the demon's name down and I'm going to butcher it. Narakasura, I'm not sure. And then you have Western India, and it's, the festival marks the day that Lord Vishnu, the preserver, sent the demon king Bali to rule the netherworld. Like, it changes from where you're at, and that, it's just another example that religions are meant to be interpreted. Like, yes, they have the ground, like, here's what it is, but it's not always black and white. It just shows that these gray areas are there. Like the story of Diwali, again, it just varies from wherever you're at, whether you're in northern India, southern India, western India, one of the little spots in between. It all changes. And to me, that is absolutely beautiful. And so I also was curious because, I found a lot of stuff on what Diwali was as a whole. Like, it's a celebration of lights. It symbolizes inner light to protect from spiritual demons. But I wanted to know what each of the days were going to be. There's 5 of them. What do you do on those 5 days? Because, there's tons of celebrations that go on for more than one day. And, I've heard of them before. So I went in and I kind of dived a little deeper into what specifically is celebrated over the 5 days. So day 1, people clean their homes. They bring gold. I lost my train of thought. Hang on. So day 1, people clean their homes and shop for gold and kitchen utensils to bring them good fortune, because in a lot of cultures, religions, gold is seen as a very prosperous color. So I'm going to have to interpret that being the reason for the gold. Day 2, they decorate their homes with clay lamps. They create sand designs. They're called rangoli, and they're made using colored sands or powders, and I've seen videos all over Facebook about them, and even on TikTok recently, and I just thought they were pretty sand designs. I didn't realize that they had a connection to the festival or even a religious connection, because up until I started this project on Hinduism, I was like, wow, colored sand, beautiful. And it really bugged me, like, because they take the video and then they blow it all away, and I was like, what? And now that I've done this research, it makes sense to me. Like, I'm slowly connecting the dots. So day 3 is the main day of the festival. Families gather, they pray, and all of that fun stuff. So when families gather, it's for something called, I also don't know how to pronounce that. Again, I should have Google translated this beforehand. Lakshmi Puja? That was probably really bad. But basically, it's just a prayer to the goddess. And then it's followed by feast and fireworks festivals. And I also found on this day, like just the festival as a whole, that it's become mandatory to give heartwarming gifts to your friends and families. And I just thought that was very, very wholesome. So day 4 is the first day of their new year. And so, they visit with guests and bring gifts and best wishes for the season. It kind of reminds me of like our New Year's celebration. Just fun with the people you love, and, I hope this year is good for you, kind of stuff like that. And then on day 5, this was probably my favorite one, because, when you grow up and get married, you don't get to see your siblings as much. So day 5, brothers visit their married sisters, and they welcome them with love and a lavish meal. And, specifically in India, that's a big thing, because once the sisters are married, they're at home with their husbands and their families, and they're starting these traditions. And that's probably going to be my favorite day. I love a gift as much as the next person, and I love it even more when it's made with love. But being able to see my brother specifically, and he can't make excuses for it, like he has to come see me, I love that. Another thing that I found was bursting crackers. I couldn't find anything specifically on if the bursting crackers were like fireworks or like actual crackers, but it's a chief ritual of the festival. And it kind of reminds me of 4th of July. Like, I'm making a lot of connections, but also I feel wrong making those connections, because I don't want to desensitize anything or invalidate it. But, I have to put A, B, and C together in order for it to make sense in my head. I'm a very visual learner, and a lot of connect the dots kind of scenarios. But back to Diwali, I also read something in my research that during the day that they decorate their homes, they also light an abundance of candles, and that made me think of Dia de los Muertos. Like, the candles are lighting their homes to emanate light and hope and keep negative spirits out. And that was another connection that I really enjoyed the fact that I made, because in paganism as well, when we light our deity candles, we're welcoming our deity into our home to protect us, and we're here to let them know that they have offerings and water and all this other stuff. And the Hindus do the same almost, only they're not specifically welcoming deities or ancestors. It's just to ward off that spiritual darkness. And, Christians do it when they pray. They're warding off spiritual darkness. And I just really, I couldn't find anything specifically on like what qualifies or constitutes being able to be a part of a Diwali celebration, but it's 110% at the top of my bucket list right now. Like, I would throw away my wedding. I mean, I'm still gonna get married. That came out wrong. But like having the big wedding and the reception and the honeymoon, I would throw it all away to spend 5 days at a Diwali celebration. I want to feel that love that I can feel in the room right now as I'm talking about it. I want to feel that from other people. And I also found that a lot of non-Hindus celebrate too. And I don't know if it's like just in India or in the world. I couldn't really find that. But Buddhists in India also celebrate that, which was also another thing that really caught my eye. And I was like, wow, okay, I can see it. And just knowing that non-Hindus celebrate it and Buddhists celebrate it, if it's a closed thing, I 100% respect it and I will never try to do it. But if it's something that I have the opportunity to do, I want that. I want to feel, I want to see it. I want to watch these people take part in their traditions. And I want to see the love and the honor and the pride that they have while they're doing it. And not pride in a negative way. I know that pride is not always the best thing, but I want to see it and I want to witness it, because just reading about it sends me through the roof. Talking about it, I'm very animated in my hand motions right now while I'm talking, and I have tears in my eyes again. So I want to be able to feel that in person if possible. Travis, if you have been able to witness that, I need you to tell me all about it as soon as possible. But with that being said, we are going to move on into the conclusion of the project itself. In my little notes that kind of guide me, I've been off tangent a few times, but whatever. My thoughts about this whole thing, like I've been saying throughout the entire thing, it was amazing to kind of make those connections. And, you know, it really opened my eyes to realize that, again, religions are different from one another, but not as different as media and religious people make them out to be. I found a lot of parallels between my personal religious and spiritual beliefs and those of the Hindus and people who practice Hinduism. And I honestly didn't think I was going to get that. I thought this was going to be another scenario where I'm reading about stuff and I don't agree with it and it upsets me. Like, recently with that video reflection about the Hasidic Jews. But I won't get into that right now. But that's what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to upset me. I thought I was going to hate this project. And in reality, I am head over heels and am currently trying to convince my fiance that our honeymoon needs to be spent in India. It's a long shot because I'm a broke college student who's graduating and is not going to have very much time to be in the real world. But that's what, even if it's got to be delayed, 10, 15, 30 years later, I want that. If you hear dogs in the background, my dogs just opened the office door and are now in here. So my feelings about it. I hate long projects. They are the bane of my existence. The actual bane of my existence. But the entire time I was doing this, it didn't feel like an assignment. It felt like my journey when I was transitioning from atheism into paganism. It was enlightening. I wouldn't go as far as to saying like it was a pilgrimage or anything like that. But it was very, very enlightening. It was a great experience. I would recommend it to anyone, specifically doing this project on Hinduism. And, similarities. That's my last bullet point for the conclusion. Similarities. I, again, thought it was going to be like me and the One of Us documentary about the Hasidic Jews. I didn't think I was going to agree with a lot of stuff, but I want to back way up and kind of talk about reincarnation, like the cycle of life, death, rebirth, being guided by karma. That's something that us pagans are very attuned to. We are driven by karma. We see it in our threefold law. You'll see it a lot of times in young practicing pagans. They'll be very, very devout. That's the first thing they learn is the threefold law. And seeing that kind of in their life, death, rebirth cycle, I was shocked. Also, the fact that the Hindus pride themselves, like, they are proud Hindus because of their organic multi-level traditions. I like to think that us pagans are the same way. Like, our traditions are what make us us. Our moonlight rituals, our collecting rainwater, our planting our gardens, praying to our gods and goddesses, our big Sabbath celebrations, I feel like are nothing compared to everything that goes on in these various Hindu festivals, especially Diwali. Like, I spent a lot of time trying to find a holiday or Sabbath in paganism that reflected Diwali, and I couldn't find it. And to me, that is probably the best thing that I could have stumbled across, is not finding a holiday that mimics so closely to another. But overall, I recommend this project to everyone. Not only is it enlightening, educational, it's fun. In 1,000 years, would I have thought to give a podcast for a final project? Absolutely not. Travis Tamarius, great idea. I actually enjoyed it. I pitched the idea earlier to run a podcast of my own called Witchy Business. But it was also cathartic. Like, there were times when I was doing research that out of nowhere I burst into tears. But it wasn't because I was stressed or feeling overwhelmed. It's because I felt relieved. And I just don't think you get that from some other religions. I don't. Like, if I had grown up only pagan with no exposure to Christianity, and I did this project on Christianity, I don't think that this podcast would be as loving as it was. Because I don't 100% agree with everything. But the fact that Hinduism but their 5, core beliefs, I'll put it as, hit so close to home. I just felt like I was on the next step of my spiritual journey. Do I identify as Hindu now? Absolutely not. I am happy with paganism. It took me a long, traumatic time to figure out where I'm at, but it felt like I was on a religious journey, finding the next step of who I am. It didn't feel like a chore. It didn't feel like work. It felt like I was supposed to be there. And if I could go back and do it again, I know I already said this before, but I will do it again and again. And I'd love to find other religions similar to Hinduism or that Hinduism inspired. My fiance, Liam Sullivan, he actually did his project on the religious meaning of tattoos back when he took your class. But he actually told me, I'll have to fact check him, but that there is a religion that stemmed off of Hinduism in Asia, and it's very similar. And I think that that would be another really good thing to look into. If I'm being quite honest with you, Travis, my curiosity has been getting the best of me, and I put off recording this a lot longer than necessary because I wanted nothing more than to look into that other religion and find something to make me feel as cathartic as I feel now. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I'm 5 minutes from the max time because I feel like I could talk to a brick wall. But thank you for listening to my podcast. I have no idea how it sounds, how it's going to turn out. I'm just really glad you couldn't see me crying throughout the whole thing. But my Thou I project, I went from being a paganism is the only correct way kind of pagan in the most respectful way possible because we're very nature based, to obsessed with somebody else's potentially whole life. And again, Diwali is at the top of my bucket list. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the content, and if I do start a podcast called Witchy Business, I hope you tune in for it.